The final sentinel hung in the cold darkness of deep space, far beyond Pluto's frozen path. It was the last watchtower of humanity, built after the war that nearly destroyed Earth. Its purpose was simple: to scan the edge of the solar system and repeat the message that had echoed through the stars for 50 years. To all civilizations, Earth stands ready. Attack again and be annihilated. No ship had dared to cross that invisible line since the end of the Devourer War. Until now, Captain James Carter stood on the main deck of the Sentinel's command center. The room was filled with dim lights, holographic screens, and the steady hum of the station's energy core. He had been stationed here for the last 5 years, commanding Earth's outermost defense. His crew worked silently around him, monitoring systems, running scans, and keeping watch on every sector. He was about to call for the nightly system check when the room shifted. Lights dimmed further. A low alarm began to sound, steady and cold. Not a drill, not a test. This was real. "Captain," called Lieutenant Marks from the sensor station. His voice was tight, controlled, but Carter knew fear when he heard it. "We've got movement. Outer boundary breached. Multiple contacts." Carter moved toward the screen. His eyes locked on the data flooding in. Heat signatures. Engine trails. Dozens. No, hundreds of ships. He didn't speak right away. He needed confirmation. "Run deep scan. Identify." Mark swallowed hard but followed the order. The room was silent except for the hum of machines. A full minute passed. Another. Then the results appeared in bold red text on the screen. "Xoreon Dominion." The words hit like a hammer to the chest. Carter felt his jaw tighten. They had returned. The monsters that nearly wiped out humanity 50 years ago. The enemy Earth had warned never to come back. He turned toward his crew. They were staring at the screen, silent, pale. Some were too young to remember the first war. Carter wasn't. He had been 16 when the first invasion came. He had seen cities fall. He had lost family, friends, everything. He took a deep breath and straightened his back. "Sound the alert," he ordered. "Full transmission to Earth Command. Mark it as Priority 1. Marks nodded and sent the alert across the solar network. Every colony, every base, every ship, all of Earth would now know the warning had been broken. Carter stepped onto the raised command platform. He tapped the control panel, bringing up the live feed to Earth's Defense Council. Within moments, holograms of Earth's top military leaders appear before him. Generals, admirals, the Secretary of Defense, even the President of the Terran Alliance. They didn't speak right away. They had seen the alert. They were waiting for Carter to confirm it. He looked each one of them in the eye, his voice steady. "It's the Xerion Dominion. They're coming. Hundreds of ships. Heavier and faster than last time. We have less than 72 hours before they reach Neptune's orbit." The president leaned forward, his face tense. "Are we sure they're not passing through?" Carter shook his head. "No, sir. Their formation is locked on a direct course toward Earth. This is an invasion." A cold silence filled the room. Then General Weaver, head of Earth's orbital defense, spoke. "What's your recommendation, Captain?" Carter didn't hesitate. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He had lived every day knowing it might come. "We raised the defense protocol to absolute zero. All colonies on lockdown. All fleets mobilized. I recommend immediate preparation for full-scale war." The council members exchanged quick glances. Some looked ready to argue. Others nodded in agreement. But in the end, the president made the call. "Do it. Send the order." The command channel closed. Carter lowered his hands and turned back to his crew. "You heard the order," he said. "Mobilize all fleets. Bring all defense systems online. Inform all colonies. The warning has been broken." His crew moved quickly. The station's systems roared to life. Weapon platforms activated. Deep space sensors locked on to the incoming enemy fleet. Carter watched the data streams, ship counts rising higher by the minute. He knew what this meant. Earth had one chance to prove its message had not been an empty threat. One chance to make the galaxy understand that humanity would never fall again. He stared out the main viewport toward the distant stars where the Xerion fleet was closing in. His fists clenched at his sides. "So they came after all," he muttered under his breath. His voice was low, steady, and cold. "Let them come. The sun was rising over Earth's surface when the Terran Defense Council gathered again. This time, they gathered in person at the Terran Command Center, buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. The center was the heart of Earth's military might, shielded from orbital strikes, powered by fusion cores, and filled with thousands of the best minds and soldiers humanity had. Captain James Carter stood before the large round table in the war room. Around him sat the highest-ranking leaders of Earth's military, including General Weaver, Admiral Hayes, and Secretary Keller. Large screens on the walls displayed tactical data, ship movements, and live footage from space probes tracking the Xerion fleet. The enemy was moving fast. Projections showed they would reach Neptune's orbit in less than 60 hours. Carter stood straight, his hands resting firmly on the table. The Xerion fleet is larger than anything we faced in the First War, he began. His voice was steady, but the weight of the moment pressed on his chest. They have advanced ship designs, stronger shielding, and faster drives. This is not the same enemy we fought 50 years ago. General Weaver leaned forward, frowning. What's their exact strength? Carter tapped a control panel on the table, and a screen filled with data. Over 600 warships confirmed. 3 Dreadnought-class carriers. 2 fleet crushers nearly the size of Earth's moon. And a flagship twice the size of anything we've ever built. A wave of unease spread through the room. Admiral Hayes broke the silence. We've been building up our defenses for years, Captain. Earth's orbital platforms, the Martian Defense Fleet, the Titan Lance. Carter held up a hand. It won't be enough. The Admiral's face darkened. Explain. Carter took a breath. I've run the numbers. Even with our full fleet, we're outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. If they break through Neptune's line, our outer defenses won't hold long. We need to be ready to use Project Blackout. A cold silence followed. All eyes turned to Secretary Keller, who had been quiet until now. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. You know the risks, Keller said quietly. Project Blackout was never meant to be used unless Earth itself was on the edge of collapse. Carter nodded. I know, but if we wait too long, we won't have the chance to use it at all. The leaders exchanged uneasy looks. Project Blackout was the most powerful weapon Earth had ever built. Developed in secret after the first invasion, it used captured alien technology to release a shockwave of energy powerful enough to disable or destroy entire fleets. But it was untested, unpredictable, and dangerously unstable. If used too close to Earth, it could cripple their own systems or worse. General Weaver shook his head. We can't risk Earth's safety unless we have no choice. We hold the outer line first. Carter knew they were right to be cautious, but every second lost brought the enemy closer. Suddenly, an officer entered the room, holding a datapad. He handed it to Carter with a pale face. Captain, we've just received a direct transmission from the Xerion fleet. The room froze. Carter took the pad and activated the message. A large hologram of Overlord Krauser appeared, filling the war room with his monstrous image. His skin was dark and scaled, his eyes glowing like molten gold. His voice was low, deep, and filled with hatred. People of Earth, your false warning echoes no longer. You dare humiliate us 50 years ago. You dare claim strength you do not have. You will surrender all worlds to the Xerion Dominion. You will kneel, or you will burn. You have 72 Earth hours to comply. The message ended. The hologram flickered out. For a moment, no one spoke. Carter stood slowly and faced the council. His voice was clear and cold. Send this reply. He leaned forward toward the recording device. His jaw clenched, and his words cut through the silence like a blade. To Overlord Krauser, Earth does not kneel. Come and find out what happens to those who challenge us again. The officers around the table stood without a word. They knew what needed to be done. Orders were sent across the solar system. Every fleet was put on full alert. Every colony was locked down. Earth's citizens were told to prepare for the worst. In the hours that followed, Carter returned to the final sentinel. From there, he watched as Earth's warships moved into position near Neptune's orbit. Thousands of ships lined up in formation, waiting for the enemy. Carter stood at the command deck, staring at the growing fleet on the long-range scans. His second-in-command, Commander Reed, approached. "Fleet's ready, sir. Just waiting for your orders." Carter didn't look away from the screen. His hands rested on the railing, his face like stone. "They'll try to break us. They'll come with everything they have," he said quietly. Reed nodded. "Do you think we can hold them?" Carter's jaw tightened. His mind flashed back to the faces he had lost long ago. He remembered the cities burning, the skies filled with enemy ships. He had survived once. He would not let Earth fall again. "We hold the line," Carter said firmly, "no matter the cost." As the final hour approached, Carter knew the battle for Earth had begun. The final sentinel floated in the darkness, silent but awake. Every scanner, every defense system, and every weapon was locked on the same target, Neptune's orbit. Captain James Carter stood in the observation deck, watching the data stream scroll across the holographic screens. The enemy was almost here. He could feel it. Every instinct, every muscle in his body was tense. On the largest display, Earth's fleet stood ready near Neptune. Thousands of ships, in perfect formation, stretched from one side of space to the other. Carriers, war cruisers, missile frigates, and defensive platforms held the line. At the center of the fleet, the TDS Valor, Earth's largest flagship, hovered like a steel giant. Carter had sent every ship Earth could spare. There would be no second chance if they failed to hold here. Commander Reed approached him, holding a data pad. "Sir," Reed said, "our long-range scanners confirm enemy arrival in less than 10 minutes. Formation is tight. Looks like they're going for a straight push through the middle." Carter nodded. "That's how they operate. Overwhelm, crush, move on." He studied the tactical map again. Krauser was pushing hard, confident his fleet could break through Earth's line by sheer force. But Carter had other plans. He turned to his communications officer. "Open channel to Admiral Hayes on the Valor." The channel opened, and the Admiral's weathered face appeared. "Carter," Hayes greeted sharply. "It's time." "Hold them as long as you can," Carter ordered. "Pull them in. Make them think you're breaking." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And when do we hit them?" Carter narrowed his eyes. "When they get close enough to think they've won." Hayes gave a sharp nod and closed the channel. Carter turned back to his crew. "Bring all weapon systems online. Prepare to send the signal when I give the word." The crew moved quickly, hands flying across control panels. The hum of charging weapons echoed through the station. Moments later, the enemy fleet emerged from the edge of Neptune's shadow. The Xerion ships spread out like a swarm of steel and fire. Massive dreadnoughts, sharp-edged cruisers, and swarms of attack crafts poured forward. It had begun. Admiral Hayes gave the first command. "All ships engage." The dark space between Neptune and Earth's fleet lit up with beams of energy, missile trails, and rapid-fire railguns. The two forces collided in a storm of destruction. Carter watched the battle unfold on the screen. The Xerion ships pressed hard, forcing Earth's fleet to fall back step by step. Explosions ripped through space as ships on both sides were destroyed. The enemy's sheer numbers were brutal. Smaller Earth ships were torn apart. Defense platforms crumbled. Carrier after carrier took damage. But Carter's plan was working. The fleet's retreat looked desperate, but it was controlled. Hayes was pulling the enemy in, closer and closer toward the trap. "Status on Project Blackout?" Carter asked without turning from the screen. Commander Reed checked the systems. "Charge and ready, sir. We just need the signal." Carter nodded. His jaw was tight. His hands gripped the railing. He knew he couldn't use it yet. If they fired too early, the enemy could scatter. They had to wait until the Xerion fleet fully committed. Minutes passed like hours. Earth's ships were pushed to the inner side of Neptune's orbit. The enemy fleet pressed in tighter. Krauser was closing his net. Carter saw it clearly now. This was the moment. "Send the signal," he ordered. "Tell Hayes to hold position and wait for my mark." The signal was sent. Hayes acknowledged. Earth's fleet stopped retreating and held the line. The Xerion ships pushed harder, sensing victory. Carter took a deep breath. "Open full broadcast," he commanded. A loud beep confirmed the channel was live. Carter leaned forward, speaking clearly so the entire fleet, friend and enemy, could hear. "This is Captain James Carter of the Terran Defense Alliance. To the Xerion Dominion, you've crossed the line. The enemy didn't stop. If anything, they moved faster. Carter turned to his weapons officer. Target their lead dreadnoughts. Fire on my mark. He waited, until the enemy fleet was packed close together, pressing toward Earth's ships. His voice was sharp and cold. Mark! The final sentinel unleashed a full barrage of energy blasts from its distant position. At the same moment, Earth's fleet opened fire with everything they had: missiles, plasma cannons, railguns. The enemy dreadnoughts were hit first. Explosions tore through their hulls, breaking their formation. Smaller ships were caught in the blast waves. The Xerion fleet staggered. Carter didn't let up. Send in the second wave. Earth's hidden strike fleet, which had been waiting behind Neptune's icy rings, burst into the fight. They attacked the enemy's exposed flanks, cutting through the scattered ships. Space lit up with more fire and destruction. Carter's trap had worked. For the first time, the enemy fleet was forced to split. Their perfect formation shattered. But it wasn't over. Krauser's flagship remained untouched at the rear of the fleet, observing. Carter stared at it on the screen. Krauser's waiting, Carter muttered. He's testing us. The battle raged on. More Earth ships fell. More enemy vessels burned. Carter knew this was only the first fight. The enemy fleet was still massive, still strong. This victory at Neptune wouldn't stop them for long. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the enemy flagship in the distance. You're next, he whispered. The enemy began pulling back to regroup, but Carter knew they'd be back, and they would hit harder. Earth had survived the first clash. The real battle was still ahead. The battle near Neptune had bought Earth some time, but not much. Captain James Carter stood once again on the command deck of the Final Sentinel, watching his updated fleet reports scrolled across the main display. The cost of the first clash was heavier than he had hoped. Nearly a third of Earth's fleet was gone. Over 100 ships destroyed, thousands of soldiers lost. And the Xerion Dominion, though wounded, was far from finished. The enemy had pulled back after the ambush, but scouts reported that they were regrouping fast. Krauser's flagship hadn't moved from the edge of the battlefield. It hovered there, silent and untouched, as if daring Earth to come after it. But Carter knew better. Krauser was patient. He would wait until Earth's defenses were stretched thin before striking again. And Earth was running out of time. Commander Reed approached, holding a fresh report. His face looked tired, like everyone else on the crew, but his voice stayed steady. Sir, Earth Defense is requesting an update. They want to know how long we can hold. Carter let out a slow breath. He looked at the numbers again. He hated what he saw. We can't hold them at Neptune any longer, Carter admitted. If we stay, they'll trap us and finish the job. Reed swallowed. So we pull back. Carter nodded. We fall back to Earth's shield. We make our last stand at home. Reed didn't argue. He knew there was no other choice. The order went out. Earth's battered fleet turned from Neptune and headed for home. The retreat was slow, steady, and silent. Carter watched from the observation deck as the fleet drifted toward Earth, leaving behind the wreckage of the first battle. By the time the fleet reached Earth's orbit, the damage was clear to everyone. Many ships limped home on half power. Some had hulls blackened and torn open. Others couldn't even land and had to be scuttled in space. Carter stood in the war room of Earth Command once again. The president, the generals, and the admirals all watched as the fleet data updated on the large screens. General Weaver rubbed his face, clearly exhausted. We lost too many, he said under his breath. Carter didn't disagree. And the worst is still coming. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. Do we still have a chance? Carter turned to face the council. We do, but only if we're willing to take the final step. The room grew quiet. Everyone knew what he meant. Project Blackout. Secretary Keller broke the silence. We agreed it would only be used if Earth itself was falling. Carter's voice was steady. It will be. When the enemy hits our shield, we'll have no other move left. Keller leaned back, frowning. And if it fails? If the blast hits Earth? Carter didn't flinch. If we don't use it, we won't have an Earth left to protect. The president stood and looked around the table. He saw the fear in their eyes. He also saw something else, acceptance. They knew the truth. This was the endgame. Prepare Project Blackout, the president ordered. but do not fire unless Captain Carter gives the order. Carter nodded. The weight of the entire planet rested on his shoulders now. Hours later, Earth's orbital defense platforms powered up. Massive cannons, shield arrays, and missile turrets surrounded the planet like a metal shell. Every colony on Mars, Europa, and Titan sent what ships they had left to join the defense. Even civilian transport ships were refitted with weapons and sent to the line. The largest space battle in human history was about to begin. Then they arrived. The Xerion fleet, larger than before, emerged from deep space and closed in on Earth's orbit. Krauser's flagship stayed behind the main fleet, watching as his forces advanced. From the final sentinel, Carter watched the enemy fill the skies. The enemy ships moved like a wall of black steel, their engines glowing with deadly light. The first shots were fired. Earth's defense platforms lit up, firing streams of plasma and waves of missiles. Earth's fleet answered with everything they had left. Space shook with the force of the weapons. Explosions filled the void. The enemy crashed into Earth's shield like a tidal wave. Defense platforms were the first to fall. The massive structures cracked and exploded under heavy fire. Earth's ships tried to hold the line, but the Xerion fleet was too strong, too fast. One by one, Earth's outer defenses collapsed. Carter clenched his fists. The situation was spinning out of control. The enemy had reached the final defense ring. If they broke through, Earth's surface would be next. Commander Reed turned to Carter, his voice shaking. "Sir, it's time. We have no other move left." Carter stared at the screen. He saw Krauser's fleet breaking through, inch by inch. He reached for the control panel and opened a direct line to Earth Command. "This is Captain Carter. Permission to activate Project Blackout." The President's voice came back after a long pause. "Granted." Carter stood up, his voice cold and sharp. "All hands, prepare for final weapon activation." The crew moved quickly. Warning lights flashed across the station. The energy core of the final Sentinel began to hum louder, building to full power. Reed looked at Carter, his face pale. "Sir, once we fire, there's no turning back." Carter nodded. His voice was low but clear. "I know." He turned back to the viewport. The enemy fleet was closing in fast. The time had come. Prepare to fire on my command. The final Sentinel's control room was quiet. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the energy core, growing louder by the second. The ship's lights flickered slightly as more power shifted toward the weapon system deep in the heart of the station. Captain James Carter stood on the raised command platform, his hands gripping the railing. His eyes were locked on the tactical display, showing the enemy fleet moving closer. Earth's outer defenses were falling apart. Entire sections of the shield had already collapsed. Xerion warships were slipping through the cracks. It was now or never. "Status on the weapon charge?" Carter asked without turning. Commander Reed checked the system again, his voice tight. 95%. Ready to fire in 30 seconds. Carter nodded once. He knew what this meant. One shot. One chance. After this, the final Sentinel systems would be drained. If they missed, Earth would have nothing left to stop the Xerion fleet from landing. The President's voice came through the command channel again. "Carter, are you certain?" Carter didn't hesitate. "This is our only shot, sir." There was silence on the other end. Then, the President gave the final words. "Do it." Carter stepped down from the platform and approached the final control switch. The key was already in place. All he had to do was turn it. He looked around the room. His crew waited for him, ready. No one spoke, but he saw the same thing in their faces. Fear and hope standing side by side. Carter placed his hand on the key. "Activate final countdown." A female voice echoed through the station speakers. "Project Blackout. Final activation in 10, 9, 8. Carter took a deep breath. His heart was pounding, but his face stayed calm. 7, 6, 5. He thought of everyone on Earth watching the sky, hoping they would survive the next few minutes. 4, 3. Carter turned the key. 1. Firing sequence active. The station trembled as the energy core unleashed its full power. From the bottom of the Sentinel, a massive surge of blue light shot out, tearing through the darkness of space. The beam expanded into a wide energy wave, spreading like a ripple across the battlefield. The Zerion ships didn't have time to move. The wave slammed into the enemy fleet with crushing force. Smaller ships were torn apart instantly. Larger cruisers lost power, drifting helplessly. One by one, enemy warships shut down, their systems fried by the pulse. Carter watched in silence as the enemy fleet collapsed. But the wave didn't stop. The energy blast kept pushing forward, reaching farther than anyone expected. Carter's eyes widened as he saw the wave getting dangerously close to Earth's own ships. "Shut it down," Carter ordered. Commander Reed slammed his hand on the emergency shutdown switch, but the system didn't respond. "We're losing control," Reed shouted. "The pulse is still spreading." Carter's heart raced. If the wave reached Earth, it could fry the planet's satellites, weapons, even the power grids. Earth would be blind and helpless. Carter turned to his engineering officer. "Dump the core. Now." The engineer didn't wait. He overloaded the core's safety controls and vented the remaining energy out into deep space. The wave slowed, then finally stopped. The room fell silent again. Carter leaned forward, staring at the tactical display. The enemy fleet had been crippled. Over half their ships were floating dead in space. Fires burned across dozens of wrecks. But one ship remained untouched. Crozer's flagship. It had stayed just beyond the edge of the pulse. Carter's jaw tightened. He planned for this, he muttered. Crozer had sacrificed half his fleet, keeping his most powerful ship out of reach. Now, with Earth's defenses burned out and the final sentinel drained, Crozer still had the advantage. Commander Reed shook his head. "We've crippled their fleet, but the flagship's still coming." Carter watched as Crozer's massive ship began moving forward again. It cut through the wreckage like a predator circling a wounded animal. Carter knew what Crozer was thinking. Earth was weak now. Their fleets were damaged. Their most powerful weapon had been fired. Crozer would come to finish the job himself. The command channel lit up again. The president's voice returned, tight with fear. "Carter, what do we do now?" Carter looked at the battered fleet still floating near Earth. He thought of the people on the ground, the colonies on Mars and Titan, the families watching helplessly from below. He clenched his fists and turned to Reed. "We take the fight to him." Reed stared at him wide-eyed. "Sir," Carter spoke louder now, his voice firm. "We gather what's left of the fleet. We board that ship. We end this ourselves." Reed nodded slowly. It was a long shot, but they had no other choice. Carter opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Carter. All remaining ships, form up. We're going after Crozer's flagship. This ends now." Across space, the damaged but determined ships of Earth's fleet began to move. The battered TDS Valor took the lead. Fighters and boarding crafts prepped for launch. Carter knew this was their last stand. One way or another, it would all end here. The battered ships of Earth's fleet moved together one last time. What was left of humanity's defenses floated in a broken line behind the TDS Valor, Earth's largest and most heavily armored flagship. The hull of the Valor was scarred from battle. Its engines sputtered slightly, but still had power. It still had fight left in it. Captain James Carter stood on the command bridge of the Valor. His crew stood ready at their stations. Some of them had bandages on their faces or blood on their uniforms. None of them had slept in days. But no one complained. They all knew what this moment meant. On the main screen, Crozer's massive flagship filled the view. It looked like a black mountain floating through space, larger than anything Carter had ever faced. Its heavy armor shimmered under the distant light of the sun. Its weapons were fully powered. It had not taken a single hit since the battle began. Carter knew why. Crozer had held his ship back on purpose. He had watched his own fleet burn. He had let Earth use its final weapon. Now he was moving in for the kill. Carter turned to Commander Reed. "Launch all boarding craft. We're going in." Reed gave the order. Dozens of small ships detached from the Valor and the other surviving cruisers. Carter and his boarding team stood ready in one of them. Their ship, the Hammer, was a thick, armored boarding shuttle built for one job: breach enemy hulls and deploy soldiers inside. The Hammer launched from the Valor and sped toward Crozer's ship, along with the rest of the boarding team. Around them, The last of Earth's fighters kept up a covering barrage to distract the enemy's guns. Crozer's flagship opened fire. Bright streams of plasma and missiles filled the space around them. One boarding craft was hit and exploded instantly. Another spun out of control. But Carter's ship kept going, pushing through the enemy fire with everything it had. The pilot shouted back over the noise. "Brace for impact." The hammer crashed into the outer hull of Crozer's ship with a loud, crushing noise. The ship's magnetic claws locked onto the surface. Sparks flew as cutting torches sliced open the enemy's armor. The breach blew open, and Carter's team rushed inside. The air inside the enemy ship was thick and cold. The walls were dark and pulsing with strange energy. Red emergency lights flashed as Crozer's soldiers poured into the corridors to defend the ship. Carter drew his rifle and took cover behind a steel beam. Laser fire cut through the air. His team spread out, returning fire. Explosions shook the walls. "Move! Push forward!" Carter shouted. They fought their way deeper into the ship, clearing hallway after hallway. Every step was a battle. The Zerion soldiers were bigger and stronger, but Earth's soldiers had something the enemy didn't: nothing left to lose. Carter kicked open a heavy door and entered a massive control chamber. At the far end, standing in front of a glowing command throne, was Overlord Crozer. The alien warlord turned slowly. His golden eyes locked onto Carter. He was even larger up close, nearly 8 feet tall, with thick armored skin and clawed hands. His face twisted into a cold smile. "So," Crozer growled, "you come to die with your planet." Carter stepped forward, raising his weapon. "No," he said firmly. "I came to finish what we started." Crozer roared and charged. Carter fired, but Crozer moved fast. He slammed into Carter, knocking the weapon from his hands. Carter hit the floor hard, but rolled to his feet. He pulled a combat knife from his belt and faced the giant enemy. Crozer lunged again. Carter dodged, slashing across the alien's arm. Black blood splattered the floor. Crozer roared in anger and grabbed Carter by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Carter gasped for air, struggling against the iron grip. But he wasn't finished yet. With his free hand, Carter reached into his belt and pulled a small plasma charge. He activated it and slammed it against Crozer's chest. The charge exploded, throwing them both across the room. Carter hit the wall hard, but managed to stand. Crozer staggered to his knees, clutching his smoking chest. His breathing was heavy, but he wasn't done. "You cannot win," Crozer hissed. Carter picked up his rifle, aimed it at Crozer's head, and spoke coldly. "I already have." He pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the chamber. Crozer collapsed to the floor dead. The enemy's command center fell silent. Carter stood there, breathing hard, looking down at the fallen warlord. He knew it was over. He opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Captain Carter. Crozer is dead. I repeat, Crozer is dead. The flagship is ours." Cheers erupted across the radio channels. Earth's fleet, what was left of it, began pushing back the remaining enemy ships. Without Crozer, the Zerion forces lost their will to fight. Some ships fled. Others surrendered. Carter leaned against the wall, his body aching, but his heart steady. It was over. Earth had won. The battle had ended, but the cost hung heavy in the air. The remains of Earth's fleet drifted in orbit, silent and broken. Wreckage floated everywhere. Twisted metal, burned-out ships, debris from both Earth and the Zerion Dominion. The space near Earth looked like a graveyard. On board the TDS Valor, Captain James Carter stood by the main viewport. His uniform was torn. His hands were scraped and bruised. His face was pale and tired, but his eyes stayed sharp. The war was over. Crozer was dead. The enemy fleet had scattered. But victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like survival. Carter watched the cleanup teams begin their work. Recovery ships moved through the debris, looking for survivors. Damaged warships were being towed back to Earth or to the Mars repair stations. There weren't many left, maybe a few dozen. Commander Reed approached, walking slowly. His uniform was stained with dust and blood, just like Carter's. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside his captain, staring out at the broken battlefield. "They're gone," Reed said quietly. "We did it." Carter nodded. though his expression didn't change. "Yes," he replied. "We did." A voice called out over the ship's communication system. "Captain Carter, you have an incoming message from Earth Command." Carter turned away from the window and moved toward the communication console. He tapped the control, and the president's face appeared, looking just as worn and tired as Carter felt. "Captain," the president said, "the whole world is watching. They're waiting for your words." Carter stood silent for a moment, thinking carefully. Then he spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Open broadcast to all channels." The technician nodded and pressed the key. Carter knew his words were about to reach not only Earth, but every colony and listening post across the solar system. His message would echo through deep space, picked up by anyone who dared to listen. Carter leaned forward and spoke the words the galaxy needed to hear. "This is Captain James Carter of the Terran Defense Alliance. The Zerion Dominion challenged us. They broke our warning. We stood, we fought, and we have won. Let this message reach every star, every empire, every ruler who thinks Earth is weak. Attack again, and you will be annihilated." He ended the broadcast. The channel went silent. Carter stepped back, feeling the weight finally lift from his shoulders. The message had been sent. The warning had been proven true. Hours later, Carter stood on Earth's surface for the first time in months. He walked through the streets of New London, the city that had become the heart of the Terran Defense Alliance. People gathered in silence as the fleet returned home. Families searched for loved ones. Some cheered, some cried, some stood quietly, knowing what had been lost to win this peace. Carter made his way to the memorial wall at Unity Square. It was already being updated with the names of those lost in the second invasion. Thousands of names, too many to count. He placed his hand on the cold stone and lowered his head. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He stayed there for a long time, thinking of the lives that had been lost, the future that had been saved, and the cost of survival. As the sun set over the city, Carter turned and walked away, knowing his duty was not over. Earth would rebuild. The fleet would rise again, and he would be ready if the stars ever threatened his home once more.